Hey, my name is Shark, all messed up, or just Samu for short. And this is Klavier Gavin. This handsome little cutie pie is not only an absolute 5-star bisexual thirst trap, but also my favorite character from one of my favorite games and franchises. Yeah, this is an Ace Attorney video. An Apollo Justice Ace Attorney video. Welcome! I want to spend these next few dozen minutes telling you all about this character and why I believe him to be one of the deepest and best written characters of the series. The twisted tragedy of Klavier Gavin is almost entirely hidden underneath the surface and may barely be visible when playing the game for the first time, yet it's definitely there. Let me be your guide, lighting candles and torches along the progression of this game to shine light onto these golden strands of semi-androgynous hair, underneath which lies one of the most broken yet valiant spirits I have ever come across in fiction. Now, before I light the first of these candles though, let me highly encourage you to play this game. You don't need to even play the other entries in the series, just this one. Plenty of longtime fans started out playing Apollo Justice as their first Ace Attorney game. It works wonderfully as it soft reboots the franchise, so no prior knowledge is needed. This game is snappy, it's funny, it's absolutely heart-wrenching and a fair challenge all at once. You will not regret it, and this video will make so much more sense and be more fun to watch if you do, as there is no avoiding me basically spoiling the entire plot and subplot of the game in this video. I only upload like twice a year apparently, so you have plenty time coming back here and making it through this game at your own pace. Love you, see you around. Alright, hey everyone that played the game. I'm so glad to have you here. Oh, and all of you that ignored me too. Genuinely, I did the exact same when I first discovered Ace Attorney. I understand. Now, I am going to structure this video around the 4 cases of this game, taking you along to shape a more and more sharpened, coherent and full image of who Klavier Gavin is as a person, as every case reveals new vantage points from which we can build a true understanding of his character. These cases basically hide little Klavier Gavin goodie bags just waiting to be unraveled by either fawning gender fluid stans or, in our case, people who love to read very deep into fictional humans. I really just want to tell you a story. The story of prosecutor Klavier Gavin. Case 1 of Apollo Justice Ace Attorney is called Turnabout Trump, and it might just be my favorite case in all of Ace Attorney. This case is a true exploration of the darkness that seems to be so inherent to any human being. Just an hour or two after booting up your Nintendo DS and inserting this cartridge for the first time, you will have already finished this case and almost certainly already be left with a very heavy feeling inside your chest. In just one single trial segment, this case manages to both call out and evoke feelings that we as a species might not even have adequate words for to describe. Yeah, the tutorial of this game is already tackling one of the most complex emotions a human person can feel. Turnabout Trump is all about trust. The trust of an absolute rookie lawyer in his mentor and his first client, pitted against one another, because one of them has to be a murderer. Thus, his own trust in the law, in the legal system and its ability to deliver justice becomes another major focus. In short, said client, this beanie-wearing weirdo, was playing cards, poker to be exact, with a man named Shady Smith. They played in the fittingly also very shady underground basement of the bar that the client is employed at, as a very mediocre bar pianist. Just a few minutes after the game had ended, Smith sat very manly and very dead in his chair at the poker table, and now the protagonist, Apollo Justice, has to somehow prove this clumsy aloof pianist's innocence at his first ever court trial with the help of his mentor, the upstanding and ever calm prestige attorney Christoph Gavin. After all the dust settles, this very mentor, a lawyer once frequently showered with praise and respect from the public, and his peers for his apparent integrity, looked up to by Apollo himself and many others as a standout professional man of law, this man all of a sudden will be found guilty of murdering Smith, a random foreign poker player with no history or apparent connection to Christoph. All the while, the clumsy pianist defendant, a former lawyer himself who got his license suspended, Phoenix Wright, steps into the role of mentor for Apollo instead of Christoph, and even pulls the crucial piece of evidence out of his indecent bubble butt at the end. It's very clear that this Phoenix character also has a lot of trust. Trust in Apollo to carry the burdens he places on him, both now and especially later on, and also trust in himself and his own ability to bring Christoph to justice. That is what transpires on the screen. But behind the pixels, unseen and unheard so far, lies another person who, more than anyone else I mentioned so far, has to reassess who and what to trust after the events of Turnabout Trump. Klavier Gavin is Christoph Gavin's little brother. He works as a prosecutor and, like basically all his predecessors in the series, he is hailed as a genius who debuted in trial before he was even legally allowed to sign contracts without supervision of his parents, and who only attends a given trial if it either piques his interest enough or he has any personal stakes in it. At this point, as someone who has played all 3 entries in the series before this one, you may sigh and wish for Capcom to come up with something new for once. But as soon as you look just a few lines of dialogue deeper, you realize that they actually did. Here. Take a look at the official promotional art for the game. This artwork is the key visual of Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, meaning it's basically used unanimously as a representation for the game more so than the actual cartridge cover art. This is the artwork that Capcom has given out to all magazines and online blog posts at the time to use front and center, as well as the album cover for the official soundtrack. Now, notice how Klavier is placed here. He is not only on top of everyone else, but also dead in the center. The lighting not dulled at all. Perfectly in the limelight and squeezed between the yin and yang of this game's dark and twisted character spectrum. Klavier stands right between Phoenix and his brother Christoph. Seriously though, just look at how he is presented here. In my eyes, his placement on the artwork doesn't induce, oh that guy is our adversary, the antagonist. No. It basically screams to me what I believe to be his actual role in this complex visual novel as a character. I believe Klavier Gavin to be just as much the protagonist as Apollo Justice is. Sure, Apollo is the one we play as and control with our A-presses and stylus tabs. But if you would just read the script of all dialogue in this game as an actual novel, you may notice what set me in shock a few weeks ago too. The story of this game revolves just as much around Klavier as it does around Apollo. Maybe even more so. Actually, I was very close to removing this segment from the video after seeing this artwork for the great Ace Attorney Resolve. If you played the game, you know that the person overlooking everyone else here in a very similar position to Klavier's is not the kindest soul and certainly no protagonist. I quickly resigned and concluded, oh well, that's just how they do key visuals, which is kind of true. But then I discovered this key visual as well. This one is from Dual Destinies, the game directly preceding the one we are talking about. All 3 of these people are protagonists to this game in an almost equal manner. I think nobody can really argue about that. You even play as all 3 of them at one point or another. Phoenix down here, however, has by far the least personal connection to the story of the game, with Apollo above him having much more already, and Athena above him being even more intertwined with the cases of this game. I want to argue the exact same interpretation for Apollo Justice's key visual here. I propose that this game too has more than one protagonist. 2 in this case. Not in the sense that you play as both, but in the sense that they both equally drive the story forward and are responsible for its eventual resolution. And that the one depicted higher up is shown like this because his personal stakes throughout the story are also much higher. Watching this first case transpire, possibly live in court himself, will set Klavier up for all he represents throughout the rest of the game. See, Klavier was the prosecutor responsible for Phoenix's attorney badge being taken away. He did so on his brother Christoph's behalf after he gave Klavier a hint that Phoenix would present false evidence in court against him. We'll dive into all of this at the end of the video, but you can be sure that this moment in particular haunted Klavier at least slightly ever since. He kept brushing it off because he trusted he did the right thing. Now, with the swing of this comically small wooden gavel, he may have lost all his trust. trust in his brother, who he looked up to, trust in the legal system if he still doubts that Christoph is guilty, and trust in his own judgment and actions concerning the fateful moment in the past. Basically, in one single instance, Klavier has been robbed of almost all trust he once held for anyone or anything in the legal world. Now there's just one thing left. One thing that he now has to place all his trust in. The first time that we actually see Klavier on screen is right in front of the crime scene in case 2 of this game. He pulls up with a badass motorcycle, has a wide smile on his face, keep that in mind for later, and either completely enchants or pisses off the people he comes across with his German-infused charm. But now already comes the first moment that, if you think about it, immediately makes him stand out to all the other prosecutors in the series. When Apollo wants access to the crime scene to investigate as the defense attorney for this case, he gets shut down by the police guard. Klavier then proceeds to just take Apollo and his half-sister Trucy, long story, right to the crime scene, without any external pressure. Just Trucy mentioning a letter of request. He doesn't even want to see it, just to make that point clear. So far in the series we have never seen a prosecutor act like that. All other adversaries in the series fought tooth and nail to keep as much evidence and information gate-kept to use as leverage in court. While Klavier here seemingly couldn't give a single hoot about all of that nonsense, because Klavier believes in fair fights. This is the first hint that our prince here has not only a very different moral compass, but also quite a strict and defined one, as he doesn't even flinch or ponder for a single moment to let these two hotheads in. The next time we see him is in court. Here we learn a thing or two right away. 1. Klavier is a damn rock star who fills entire stadiums, and 2. Because of the former, he took a long leave of absence from the courtroom, shifting his focus towards his musical career. But now he suddenly returns to the prosecutor's bench for a case about a dead dog dragging a noodle shop accusing a wannabe mob boss. Why? Well, he says himself. Klavier came back to specifically face Apollo head to head. He wants to face the young man that got his brother behind bars. Next, Klavier immediately shows another act of fair sportsmanship. But you have to read a little between the lines to understand it as such. Klavier tells the defendant Woki Kitaki, and by extension Apollo, here right off the bat, before any testimony, that Woki carries a dormant but possibly still fatal bullet wound in his chest from a past Yang fight. Now, I want you to understand that he did not need to reveal this information here. He just wanted to on his own accord and even delayed the witness testimony for it. I believe he did that because he considered it to be potentially relevant information. And so he shared it right at the start of the trial so everyone is on the same page. That's how Klavier ticks. He wants a fair fight. After a quick back and forth with Apollo, he then suddenly puts out this verbal jab, clearly indicating that he does still resent Phoenix deeply and believes the man plays with dirty tricks. In the following first trial and eventual conclusion of it, Klavier is often expected by the quite repulsive witness to bail him out. But Klavier seemingly just does not care. Every time a valid argument is brought up by the defense, Klavier doesn't make up some far-fetched counterpoint like other prosecutors might. Rather, he acknowledges the direction that the defense is carving out, but also then inquires Apollo to make sense of it all. In short, he just sits back and actively encourages his adversary to piece the truth together, while probably doing just the same in his own mind alongside him. Same with the second trial, where we find the actual killer, who, backed into a corner by Apollo after once again being encouraged by Klavier, asks the prosecutor if he too wants to frame her for the murder, to which Klavier finally confirms what we have speculated by bluntly replying, "Me? Fräulein. I only wish to know the truth." Afterwards, it turns out that the circumstance that truly proves the murderer's guilt was hinted at by Klavier in the second investigation all along. indicating that there is a good chance he knew the entire truth all along and simply wanted to test Apollo to figure it out too. What a guy. Now, despite all his kind gestures and cryptic tips, one could, at least in this case, read him as a straight antagonist like all other prosecutors started out as well. In fact, he clearly is openly antagonistic towards at least Phoenix, still believing he faked evidence, which, to be fair, he did in case 1, which was the only reason Apollo won that case. Also, he teases Apollo / have forehead quite a bit, and it could come off to some as if he resents him too for Christoph's apprehension. But with everything we are going to discuss further on, I want to propose the view that this is Klavier's way to make up his mind on whose side he wants to fight. He wants to see whether Apollo has his heart in the right place, how the kid reacts when being pressured and faced with defeat, and if he truly possesses the integrity and skills to faithfully bring someone like Christoph to justice without any foul play. He didn't. Especially being mentored by Phoenix now. He wants to see if Apollo fights fair in court, if he believes in honest methods, and as such, by proxy he wants to make up his mind on whether his own brother deserves the verdict he received after case 1. Klavier must be insanely conflicted at this point of time. And the thing that he turns to, the one thing that he still trusts, is his own very sharp moral compass. He trusts in justice, like no one else in this game. He believes that doing bad things has to have consequences and that everyone should always refrain from using any dirty tricks, even for a noble cause. Especially not people of law, like lawyers, prosecutors and judges. To emphasize and support that point, let me present to you this much more anti-aliased version of Klavier. In the successor to this game, Dual Destinies, Klavier reveals how his personal view on justice and law was shaped and inspired by Constanze Kort, a teacher at Themis Legal Academy who believed in clean methods and values the truth as the highest objective to find in court. From her influence, he might have developed this understanding that the defense and prosecution are not only adversaries but also allies that should work together to find out the truth, rather than to solely work towards a win for their respective side. The truth is victory for Klavier. No matter the verdict given, if the truth came out during a trial, everyone has won. That is how he thinks, and that's why he believes in playing fair and deeply resents any person of law that does anything dishonest. This is the reason why he spits all this verbal venom towards Phoenix, because even disregarding the faked evidence, which again, he did present at least once, Phoenix was and is most known for his outstanding bluffing skills, something that isn't necessarily a clean tactic of lawyering. But now suddenly, the one person who, in his but also much of the public's eyes, represented the pinnacle of clean and honest lawyering, has been found guilty of murdering a person. Klavier looked up to his brother so much. Christoph was his idol. Now he doesn't know if he can take Christoph at any of his words anymore, even all the past ones. And so he has to make up his mind based on something else. Was his brother a scapegoat and got framed for a crime he didn't commit by this fraudulent hedgehog hairstyle hobo hooligan, or is his brother actually guilty? Finding an answer to that is his motivation for cancelling concert shows, potentially bringing in hundreds of thousands of
in-world currency.
He does it to have a chance to see and hear and talk to Apollo in person, to find answers for himself. Answers to questions like, is my brother, my idol, the reason why I became a man of law and justice, is my brother a murderer? Imagine how this question must weigh on him, how it burns and swallows all his thoughts, how it lingers within him and harbors more and more doubts towards everything he ever believed in. Throughout this trial, he is rocking his air guitar, standing confidently upright and always smiling. But sometimes it is the one who smiles that suffers the most. Case 3 is by far the case with the most Klavier screen time, all thanks to the fact that this case's murder was committed backstage during one of the Gaviners' concerts. That's Klavier's band, by the way, with Apollo and Trucy being the ones to find the deceased body first. As Klavier says later on, it sure is quite the evening, alright. We found out that the Gaviners have a very unique gimmick, as Trucy explains, being that all 5 members of the band have a connection to police work. Along with this information, we also get to know a certain Detective Darian Crescent from Criminal Affairs Division 3, who Klavier himself introduces as his right-hand man, as well as the lead guitar for the Gaviners. With 5 people proficient in investigating and pursuing crime, it is no wonder how quick and effective they act after they get word that someone has been murdered at the event. Immediately they shut all entrances and exits of the venue, then took names and addresses of every single person present, let them go and immediately closed off the building once again to preserve evidence. That is some quick thinking. However, Klavier presents himself throughout this first investigation as not amused at all. And that is not entirely because a person has been found dead at his concert, but also because he had a really awful day in general, as he tells us. For starters, he lost his keys on the morning of a damn concert, including the keys for his motorcycle and his guitar case. Just that alone would have already set most people into a full-on anxiety. Then on stage, his goddamn guitar lights up in flames in his hand. And then he also points out that his own theme song had been messed up by one of his band members missing their cue right at the highlight of the song. The latter sounds by far the most manageable and lightweight to most. Not to Klavier though. He is so incredibly upset about it that he seems to forget about everything else for a moment or two. He doesn't, actually. But still to him this missed cue bothers him personally to a very similar extent as losing his keys and almost getting grilled on stage does. The latter of which also seems to personally sting, not because he nearly needed skin transplantation, but much more because he lost his precious acoustic guitar. Very interesting. All of the above paints a picture of Klavier Gavin being a mad perfectionist in all areas of life. Like all perfectionists, he isn't actually perfect himself, but he always strives for it and expects the same from his peers too. He gives us a little glimpse that this general perfectionism might actually still be connected to a strong sense of justice by dropping this little line of dialogue on Darian, who he openly blamed for the missed cue and turned out to be correct. His perfectionism leads to a lot of verbal complaining in this investigation segment, and it might come off as pathetic and whiny to some, as it does to Trucy actually. But while I don't want to encourage his entire attitude here, I do have to point out that he is not whining because he feels entitled to anything. He is whining because he feels his audience is entitled to a good show. His keys missing sucks because he might have been late and may have not been able to open his guitar case. His guitar going up in flames means he can't play this high quality guitar at the next concert, and the missed cue of course means a worse performance for the audience as well. This might seem like devil's advocate, but I think he is intentionally written this way because of moments like this. Notice how he completely eases up and his entire demeanor lightens as soon as Trucy said she thought the guitar burning was part of the act and intentional. He seems so relieved, like that was literally all he worried about. For Klavier, it's not about him, it's about his fans. The people who paid money and spent their evening to come see the Gaviners play. And when prosecuting, it's about the victim getting justice served and the general public being safe from crime. In both cases, he expects his peers to care about these principles like himself, and honestly, I think that's fair. Because in my eyes, both should be inherent to doing the job of either a stage musician or a person of the executive or judicative. And again, he sure does have quite good reason to be upset. Who wouldn't be whining about a day like he has been through? Like, that's rough, cut the man some slack. He even apologized for his behavior the next morning to Trucy and Apollo. In the following trial, we see Klavier's perfectionism in the form of a professional, no-nonsense prosecutor Gavin. In somewhat of a contrast to the previous case, he is determined to bring this trial to a swift end and seems to have absolutely no chill at all. If it weren't for this attitude of his, this trial would probably feel absolutely hilarious otherwise. Literally all people in this courtroom except the judge were within a few meters of the crime when it was committed, and the cross-examinations are exactly as unhinged as you would expect them to be based on that. Yet our prince here has suddenly become a cold-blooded assassin. He presents his case with utmost precision in his logic and concise language, and every line of dialogue here may make you wonder if all we seem to have learned about the man so far was just a farce, with this being his true self. Well, I am here to argue the exact opposite. I think writing Klavier to be so adamant and resolute in this case is a brilliant way to further develop and deepen his character. If you sit down and think about it, it makes perfect sense. Listen, when this murder was committed, the entire band of the Gaviners was literally on stage performing. The victim was killed backstage with security in place as confirmed by Apollo himself, meaning the only people Klavier reasonably could suspect are 1. Detective Emma Skye, who sounds like she needed to be dragged to the venue to work there. 2. Apollo himself, who was probably the only VIP ticket holder, rather sneaking around backstage instead of tending to the actual concert. 3. A blind woman with amnesia. And 4. The defendant, Machi Tobaye. Accusing Machi and believing this strongly in his guilt, as Klavier seemingly does here, is not a sign of antagonism towards the defense and Apollo, it's the exact opposite. By accusing Machi, Klavier shows how much he believes Apollo himself to be innocent, as everyone else makes even less sense as the killer or has a pretty waterproof alibi. So yeah, Klavier is absolutely hell-bent on getting our defendant behind bars. But I think that's entirely because he is 100% certain this guy is guilty. And I argue he'd somehow be probably even more aggressive facing any other lawyer than Apollo defending Machi here. I mean, he is a star prosecutor and there has been a murder at one of his very own concerts. He so desperately wants to catch not anyone but the actual culprit, that in this desperation he sadly fails to notice the tiny details that point to this actual culprit. But from the moment that we, thanks to pissed off Emma, find out that the victim was writing an Interpol ID with his own blood, we finally get our kind-hearted, helpful good boy Klavier back. Instead of trying to end the trial ASAP, Klavier now wants to learn all about this ID number, lays out all the cards he still had up his sleeve, namely that the defendant is not blind at all like he pretended to be, and openly apologizes to Emma for leaving her in the dark. The field is leveled, and for Klavier it's now time to find out the truth. Together. After the first trial segment, we meet Klavier again visiting his prosecutor's office and eavesdropping on a confidential phone call. When he finds out, he doesn't get mad at all, actively explains the whole conversation to Apollo and Trucy, says he wishes for more teehees in this world, calls his guitar his lovers like the polyamorous gender-fluid king he is, and presents literally everything he knows about this case and its surrounding context to Trucy and Apollo with unrivaled transparency. After all this chatting, Klavier opens up to Apollo and outright states he has always one simple goal in mind: finding the truth. And thanks Apollo for his own openness and transparency towards the prosecution. This whole scene in his office truly shows to me that all of Klavier's prior perceived coldness was purely based on his utmost conviction of Machi's guilt, and Apollo standing in his way towards justice being served. Now that he has genuine reasons to doubt this initial judgment of his, he once more views Apollo as his partner in finding out the truth together. Not letting Machi off the hook of course, but also doing everything in his power now to enable Apollo figuring out what really happened if it comes to light that someone else is responsible for the crime committed at his concert. This someone would present themselves as a certain Darian Crescent, Klavier's right-hand man as he called him earlier. His year-long friend and bandmate, and Klavier doesn't even flinch calling him to the witness stand. He is the first person in the courtroom to openly call Darian a suspect after time and time again following Apollo's logic and even bailing him out once or twice. With any other prosecutor, Detective Crescent would have very likely gotten away with his frankly really well executed and covered up murder. But Klavier Gavin is angry now, and he wants to hear from his friend himself. He demands the truth from him. Before calling him to the stand, Klavier expresses how he cannot see Darian as a criminal after all these years together. But after the man finally steps into the courtroom and asks Klavier how he could let this happen, I think Klavier already understands exactly who he was standing on stage with all this time. And don't call me partner. Ouch. What follows is an absolute novum in the entire series, where Apollo, as the defense attorney, goes all in the offensive, accusing his own client of being complicit in the murder and working together with the actual culprit, while Klavier, as the prosecution, shuts down every single bad excuse that the witness, his own friend, conjures up. Both parties in the courtroom in this case breach all unspoken bounds and sacrifice their own wins purely for finding out the truth. And Klavier, after handling Darian as a witness and suspect so professionally and objectively by the protocol, ends it all by personally telling him,
"Darian, I consider that my last session with you. We rocked."
They rocked. I can clearly see Klavier sinking into that chair at his office that is so filled and littered with guitars and records and memories of their past gigs. Darian Crescent was Klavier Gavin's right-hand man. He was the first detective he ever worked with as a prosecutor. He stood with him on stage so often it must have felt like he belonged right next to him. And that would never change. It changed. Understandably, the Gaviners were disbanded after Darian's conviction. One must imagine Klavier laying in his armchair playing chords on that obscenely stylish keyboard. He plays them purely by instinct, letting his feelings move his fingers over the black and white as he ponders how it all went wrong. How these people that he loved and trusted and believed in all these years have viciously and selfishly murdered another human being out of greed and fragile ego. I think being a rock star and playing music fits Klavier so perfectly. It gives him an avenue for greatness, but also it's an art. Despite all his perfectionism, he recognizes that music is born from feelings. When he sings and plays guitar, he is finally allowed to feel all these emotions he doesn't usually let out. And it allows him to always stand back up, get back to work and meet every kind soul that deserves it with a smile. The final case of this game, Turnabout Succession as it is named, is a heckin' mess. This case may be one of the most well-written stories in this entire franchise, but that story is hidden behind many layers of mysterious storytelling. As fellow Turnabout Trump enjoyers Kempfdog and 256Pi have concisely put it, the Mason system investigation that guides you through this beautifully complex story is both this case's biggest linchpin and its biggest downside. Even if you heeded my advice from the start of this video and played through the game before watching, you might still get spoiled in a sense by me retelling the plot of this case. So, be warned, I guess. I decided to forego guiding you through the case as you play it in-game, and instead take you along the entire timeline of events from the perspective of Klavier. Let's follow our prince for one final, personal journey. First, let me introduce you to a few characters that are vital to this case and that I have not mentioned yet. Don't worry, there aren't that many actually. This is the Troupe Grammarier, a group of very famous stage magicians active in the early 2000s and 2010s. They were famous enough to have their own regular TV program as well as official post stamps in their honor. This right here is the founding member, Magnifi Grammarier. This is his daughter Thalassa, this is Thalassa's husband Zach, and this is Valant. Then here we have Drew and Vera Misham, father and daughter living as independent artists together, making their ends meet by using their skills to forge documents or any kind of item in exchange for under-the-hand payment. And lastly, here we have Klavier Gavin. Yes, we already met him in case 1, but let's give him a proper introduction too. He is Klavier Gavin's older brother and a true paragon of lawyering and the so-called coolest defense in the West. He had great renown and prestige already at a very young age and has even been called to be a member of the board of the Bar Association for Defense Attorneys. All that, of course, fell apart when he got apprehended for killing a man named Shady Smith with no clear motive in case 1. Alright, that's all of them. Now, let's start by removing one of these characters from the equation already. In 2016, Thalassa Gramari gets shot doing a rehearsal of a part of their show involving live and loaded pistols. The incident was covered up by McNeefy himself, but he retired as a consequence, leaving the troupe to slip out of public fame and receptions quite quickly. Only 3 years after that, in April of 2019, McNeefy was on his deathbed, suffering from liver cancer. He called in first Zach and then Valant to his bedside, testing their grudge by telling them to shoot him with one of those pistols square in the forehead. Zach passed the test, shooting a plush clown instead. Stick with me, I promise this is relevant. And thus he inherited the rights to perform McNeefy's most famous magic trick. Valant came afterwards and already saw through the test when he got the letter calling him there. He came planning to actually shoot McNeefy and frame Zach, possibly for marrying his crush, and also inherit the sole performance rights himself. However, he didn't shoot McNeefy either, he just left without a word. Immediately though, McNeefy shot himself, and as Valant heard the shot, he decided to frame Zach anyway and manipulated the crime scene as such. Subsequently, Zach Gramari was accused of murdering his mentor McNeefy. The prosecutor in charge for this trial would be none other than our prince, a 17-year-old phenom behind the prosecutor's bench, leading his first trial ever, Klavier Gavin. As for the defense side, Christoph Gavin was looking to secure himself the mandate of defending Zach in court. His motivation, of course, being all that juicy clout. Christoph rightfully assumed that this case about a nationally known television magician killing his mentor would make big waves in the media, and he wanted that fame. Especially the fame he would receive if he somehow got Zach a not guilty verdict could catapult his already booming career way high upwards. Such a scenario enticed the 25-year-old Christoph so much that he resorted to contacting a certain Drew Misher, known in criminal circles for being maybe the best man to hire for forging or fabricating any document you may need. Christoph, acting under a pseudonym of course, even visited Drew personally in his home/studio. He quickly figured out that it was Drew's daughter Vera who actually did the forging herself, and so he asked to speak to Vera alone, which the careful Drew reluctantly agreed to, keeping all the cold hard cash in mind that Christoph is willing to pay them. Money that they desperately need to keep up their humble lives and retain Vera the security and safety she enjoyed so far. As Christoph tried to win the trust of the highly introverted and shy Vera, he finally broke through by bonding with her over the troupe Gramari. She was a massive fan of them, and he of course was now intimately familiar with them after researching the case. In the end, he got the forgery he wanted. A perfect replica of McNeefy's diary, including fabricated pages with handwriting on it indistinguishable from McNeefy's. And for it, Christoph left the Mishams both a poisoned poststamp and a poisoned colorless nail polish as a lovely thank you, designated to kill Drew and Vera respectively, and prevent them from spilling any beans. Unluckily for him though, Vera admired him so much that she kept both items as lucky charms, unused with her for the next 7 years. That's none of past Christoph's concerns though. With his supposed diary page in hand, with which he planned to implicate Valant as the murderer to get Zach free in court, he sought out the man, utterly sure already of his imminent success. The only thing that could possibly thwart his plans would be Zach turning him down as his defense lawyer. But I mean, he is one of the most reputable and talked about attorneys in the country already, with a flawless What? A card game, you'd say? Poker? Well, Zach turned him down as his defense lawyer. Christoph is absolutely in shambles. He just spent days of his time researching and 100,000 of
in-world currency
on a forgery for this stupid case, just to be discarded by a man accused of murder with the wave of a hand, seemingly only because he lost to him in a game of poker. That's what Christoph thinks happened. But in reality, Zach, like all good magicians, still had a trick up his sleeve. It's not explained how, but Zach supposedly tested Christoph for his honesty and trustworthiness over that seemingly simple game of cards. Zach swore by this method and deemed Christoph to be highly dubious, which, to Zach's credit, checks out. So next, Zack calls up the next most reputable defense attorney in the district at the time, Phoenix Wright, and invites him to play poker too. Not only did Phoenix become the second person ever to beat Zack in a round of poker, but he also passed Zack's vibe check and got hired to defend him in court in like 2 days. As Christoph heard the news that Phoenix Wright, who he personally considered one of his arch rivals on his quest to become the best and most famous attorney of the universe or something like that, had been chosen by Zack for this trial, he snapped just a little and gave in to pure jealousy and spite. These emotions led him to consult his younger brother, who was so innocently eager to face off against Christoph in his first trial, completely oblivious to the fact that his brother tried to beat him with forged evidence. Christoph decided to use his forgery against the man who had taken his place and pitched Klavier shortly before the trial that he believed a forged piece of evidence will be presented by the defense, and even named Drew Misham as the probable forger and thus possible witness to call. Klavier, who deeply and blindly trusted his brother Christoph, didn't question for one moment how he could have known that, and instead immediately began to prepare a strategy to lure Phoenix into presenting this forgery. Meanwhile, Christoph, with his signature warm presence and friendly demeanor, enticed Zack's blue-eyed daughter Trucy, hey, we know her, to bring her father's lawyer this very important piece of paper. She did, and Phoenix, being used to last-minute surprise evidence, just assumed that once more luck was on his side. As he enters the courtroom, Phoenix finds himself looking into the eyes of just another genius young prosecutor. One of those that come up every single year, according to him. One of those that he has dealt with multiple times before. Phoenix Wright has been a lawyer for years now. He is the veteran between the two. Quite frankly, he is the boomer here, who doesn't miss a chance to signify the importance that actual experience holds in court and how disrespectful the youth of today has grown. To his credit, Klavier is unnecessarily hostile and cocky here in a way we have not seen before. He is full of himself after literally charting with one of his singles while also getting his prosecutor's badge at age 17. But what he definitely isn't is overconfident. The strategy he laid out for himself to take down the man that stole his brother's place on a defense bench may genuinely be perfect, because it is two-layered. The first layer prosecutes Zack Remarier based on the collected evidence and the testimony of his partner Valant. Klavier lays out his case with surgical precision and leaves only the most minuscule of openings for Phoenix. Yet, Phoenix's experience truly seems to serve him well, as he still absolutely dismantles Klavier's near-waterproof case. Without stumbling or skipping a beat, Klavier gets humbled by the renowned ace attorney as he completely rips open these tiny gaps in the prosecution's case and turning them into gaping ravines. Likely unbeknownst to Klavier, having tampered with the crime scene, Valant lets his tongue just a little too loose and casually named the color of some IV fluids that the dying McNeefy was hooked up to. Something he could have only known if he handled the substance himself. That slip of the tongue was all Phoenix needed to obliterate Valant's alibi and Klavier's entire case against Zack. At this point of the trial, Phoenix basically has won already, in the sense that he successfully made the witness look so suspicious that his client seems very innocent in comparison. A textbook Wrightian win. He clearly toppled Klavier's first layer of prosecution, the layer that was meant to win only if Phoenix was not as skilled as his reputation would imply. Klavier very well expected Phoenix to spot some inconsistencies in Valant's testimony. Inconsistencies that Klavier likely noticed himself. The curtain falls now as Klavier's second layer doesn't prosecute Phoenix's client anymore, but rather Phoenix himself. Klavier submits the victim's diary to the court record, a diary that, at first glance, seemed to abruptly end right after, promising to continue if Zack passes McNeefy's test. A diary that then, at second glance, has a suspiciously important piece of paper-shaped ripped edge on the inside that, of course, the judge either does not notice or care enough to address at all. Phoenix is utterly stuck here. That paper he was given by that little girl seems too good to be true. A solution so obvious it can't be right. Yet, if he doesn't present it now, his client is instantly back to being the prime suspect. Prosecutor Klavier Gavin is a fair fighter, even at this age already. He asks Phoenix with clear, unmistakable warning in his tone if he truly wants to present this piece of evidence. The music stops. He chooses wrong. Klavier Gavin makes a call to put the trial on hold and calls in the witness his brother Christoph named him for this exact occasion, Drew Misham. Once again, Klavier empathizes with Phoenix as much as he can and requests to conclude this testimony and the rest of this trial without any audience in an effort to keep the looming repercussions as tame as possible. Drew Misham admits and even proves that this diary page is a forgery. And that's that. Even in this moment though, Phoenix vehemently fights for his client, who he only met a few days ago, by telling the court his own actions can't be used against his client. But it's too late. Zach Ramayo will be held accountable for the murder of his whoop, and he's gone. So Zach decides to vanish without a single trace, and Phoenix is left with the repercussions of presenting forged evidence in a court of law. A little girl abandoned by her father, and presumably a deep, aching feeling in his stomach. And our prince? Klavier, of course, is spared from all of that, except that rumbling stomach. Klavier is left wondering, after witnessing Phoenix so calm, yet so opposed to having forged something. He saw a lawyer still fighting for his client without hesitation after seemingly being exposed as a fraud. He saw a man who respects the court and its rulings while also seemingly pleading for his own innocence. And so he is left wondering for the next 7 years whether his actions caused a vile wannabe to rightfully get disbarred from the courtroom or whether it caused an honest man to lose his passion, job, and trust in the good of heart. Ah yeah, the timeline. We're following a timeline here. So next, Phoenix is trialed before the defense attorney bar association to decide whether or not he can keep being a lawyer. And no. They say no. Christoph is a member of that board and actually voted against Phoenix's disbarment in a minority. He did that to win Phoenix's trust and befriend him because Christoph seemingly lives by the advice to keep your friends close and enemies closer, I guess. Phoenix is understandably quite put off by Christoph's sudden amity and kindness after barely knowing the man and actively competing with him for clients. He agrees to play friends with him though because, you know, enemies closer and stuff.
Hey, weird internet shark? Why are you telling me all this hoot hoot? I thought this was a video about Klavier Gavin and…
Shh. I'll tell you soon enough. Now listen. After having lost his badge and suddenly becoming a single father, Phoenix becomes just a little bit jaded and bitter and strange, I don't know. He collects evidence over the course of the next 7 years to first figure out who ordered that forgery and then why, and how it ended up in his fingers. Next, Klavier's newest hit single, Guilty Love, shakes up the industry and fangirls, boys and non-binaries all over the globe experience heart attacks at an alarming rate. Oh yeah, and a certain Apollon Justiz or whatever graduates law school, I guess. And thus we arrive in 2026, which, depending on when you watch this video, is either next year, this year, or already in the past, in which case you and me, buddy, are old. And the events of Turnabout Trump, which now actually makes sense as well. Zach Ramayo comes back out of hiding under the name of Shady Smith and seeks out Phoenix at the bar he is working at. They play poker because Zach is still butthurt over his loss or something, but much more importantly, he passes the rights to McNeefy's trick that he received by passing his little test in the hospital back then, onto Trucy. Zach knows that Phoenix adopted his daughter and this is his only reason to visit the country again. He plans to leave right after their meeting because he still feels unsafe and sadly he will be proven right, as Christoph Gavin seems to have immediately tracked him down to bring him down. Christoph knows that Zach knows the forged diary page could have only come from Christoph, not Phoenix, and he will just not tolerate any beans to be spilled, even after 7 years. This murder will get Christoph convicted and jailed after having been brought down by his own mentee, Apollo Justice. In jail, thanks to some connections, he gets a very stylish cell, full with a fancy bookshelf as well as the permission to write and receive mail. In October 2026, Christoph receives one particularly interesting letter, one with a yellow envelope and a very unique stamp on it. Yeah, that stamp. The one with the Grammarius on it. And the poison. Christoph simply smiles, as he knows after 7 whole years, finally he killed the man that knew. Sure, he's already in jail, but at least this win was his. Drew Misham dies on October 6th, and as neither he nor his daughter basically ever leave the house, it is very predictable who will be accused of poisoning the man. Vera Misham gets arrested and Apollo Justice will take her case. And action. As it turns out, Phoenix Wright has been assigned the man in charge of conducting and installing a test run for an alternative system of court trialings. One where not the judge alone, but a board of jury members randomly selected from the general populace decide the final verdict. Phoenix is told to select a simple case for this test run and to swear in 6 jurors completely unaffiliated with said case. He does neither. Not only jurors, but also the prosecution is heavily involved with this very much not so simple case. Klavier Gavin will take to the prosecution bench, arguing to convict Vera of killing her father. I want to emphasize this again. He doesn't take this case because he himself believes Vera was guilty. He was asked by Phoenix directly to fulfill this role. This request and him accepting it is the one moment that maybe signifies most how much of a protagonist our prince has become for this story. This trial is the resolution to his character arc. Him accepting Phoenix's invitation is the reason why I told you this entire timeline of events in such detail, because he was told too. Klavier knows about all these circumstances now as well. Phoenix has compiled all relevant information and evidence to piece together this all-encompassing timeline and entrusted it to Apollo. And Apollo lets it burst out into the world at large, but also towards Klavier right in front of him. Apollo himself, of course, is totally oblivious to the true weight of this evidence he carries forth. He is a mere marionette, perfectly fulfilling his role in Phoenix's elaborate stage play. The first trial is honestly very plain and dry, until Apollo almost ends it in one foul swoop by proving an alternative method of murder while simultaneously explaining away all evidence initially used to incriminate Vera. He does it through raising the theory that not Drew, but Vera was the actual forger creating the works signed by her father's hand. Subsequently, she is called to the witness stand to confirm this crucial piece of evidence. She does her best, providing answers with hundreds of eyes locked at her silhouette from all angles in this public trial. She stutters, bites her nails, but she truthfully confirms Apollo's suspicions and subsequently raises Klavier's suspicions for something entirely else. The alternative murder method Apollo was proposing earlier involves a poisoned postage stamp, and the supposed letter that contained the stamp arrived at the Mishams 7 years ago. If hearing about a forgery ordered 7 years ago made Klavier uncomfortable, then hearing the name of the people printed on that fateful stamp must have induced striking shivers down his spine. Vera reveals this stamp was precious to her, thus she kept it for all these years behind a wooden frame. It was precious because it depicted her favorite magicians. Apollo asks, she replies, "The Grammarius." From this point onwards, Klavier is quaking. Now he is left stuttering and his coolness heats up drastically. He inquires. He demands of Vera to know if this forgery ordered 7 years ago was a book. And yes, it was. Was it a diary? Yes, it was a diary. And had it a silken hat on its cover too. Vera is utterly surprised. And with a final yes, Klavier is sure that the witness standing right before him is the true creator of the piece of evidence that he used to bring down and disbar maybe the most well-known defense attorney in the country. He lets the oblivious Apollo in on what he knows, and his quick-thinking adversary immediately jumps onto the opportunity and asks Vera if she knows who the person was that ordered the forgery Klavier remembered. Yet after one final glance at Klavier's face, Vera passes out, right before the beans were finally spilled. As the doctors confirmed, she was poisoned. A day goes by with Vera fighting for her life in hospital and Klavier supposedly fighting demons late at night. I told you earlier that Christoph was the one giving Drew and Vera the poison poster stamp and nail polish. He intended to silence them 7 years ago already. It didn't work. Then. But in the end it sadly did. Drew Misham sent Christoph a letter with the poison stamp because he suddenly felt so pressured by a curious reporter that he had to write Christoph immediately even though he had no stamps left. And so, in his desperation to reach out to him as soon as possible, resorted to using Vera's treasured stamp. And then Vera herself. After losing her father as basically the only human person in her life, and having been arrested and trialed for murdering him as well, remembers her lucky charm. The thoughtful gift of a friend she met 7 years ago. For the trial, she put on Christoph's nail polish, the poisoned nail polish. And then, as Christoph intended, when put under stress and inquired to spill beans, she bit her nails. In the cruelest form of genius, Christoph, possibly even unaware of it, designed a double murder trap in a way that no matter when the first is triggered, the second one is almost surely activating as well. Because as soon as Drew dies, no matter if 7 years ago as intended, 7 years later or even 20 years in the future, when Drew dies, Vera uses the polish and bites her nails. Absolutely chilling. While Vera is still in the hospital, the court decides to trial her in absence just the day after. Apollo, the marionette equipped with the heavy binder containing all of Phoenix's evidence, only needs a few text boxes of dialogue to immediately accuse Klavier Gavin as the person responsible for Drew's and Vera's poisonings. Klavier, in response, only nods, and admits that he has known for quite some time that, quote,
"An impenetrable darkness lurked at the bottom of this. A darkness that has swallowed even myself."
This is telling. With the first sentence, he confesses to not oppose the implications of his brother's guilt anymore, and with the second sentence, he admits to have believed otherwise in the past. In short, he once trusted his brother and, in the recent past, has come to terms with the reality of this trust being misplaced. During Christoph's testimony, Klavier attacks almost every sentence Apollo throws out, and that is not out of hostility. It is because Klavier knows exactly how high the standard must be for an accusation to actually leave his brother without a counterpoint. And he's right. Christoph refuses to give Apollo an inch even when Apollo does claw his way towards connecting Christoph and the poison stamp. Christoph replies smugly that he had no way of planning that crime because he couldn't control the victim choosing this particular postage stamp. Weird answer, right? Apollo is stumped by it, but Klavier sees through it and lifts the defense up by calling Christoph out. This time it is not the defense bluffing, but the witness. Christoph didn't need to control the moment of the murder to be the murderer. Klavier is in shambles. He screams at Apollo, basically begging him to provide evidence of Christoph's connection to the Mishams. In response, Apollo pulls out some shammy reproduced letter made by Phoenix based on a real letter he read snooping in Christoph's cell. Christoph swiftly calls it out and it gets rejected by the judge. But not by Klavier. He stands back up and smiles, threatening Christoph that he has his very own beans to spill. And his nail polish is not colorless. Christoph tries to pressure his brother with all the things that he assumes are important to Klavier, because that's all he ever cared about himself. His reputation, his fame, and his career. Apollo tries to steer Klavier back onto the path of finding the truth, but he assures everyone that not a single step has he ever taken astray from that path. Christoph says,
"Klavier, you're spinning out of control."
And Klavier just answers,
"Whose control? Yours or mine?"
And then he finally spilled the beans. He tells the court how he was tipped off by his brother 7 years ago, right before the trial that ended Phoenix's career. He states that it was Christoph that told him about the forgery and gave him the contact information for Drew Misham. Christopher Gavin is ordered to give another testimony. He is utterly gone by this point already jailed and completely consumed by his own fabrications and the tangled web of schemes he spun and trapped himself in. He can't think of any evidence to incriminate him for the crime of murdering Drew and Vera, and so he states that all had gone perfectly for him. What insane hubris, what deranged understanding of perfection coming from Christoph's mouth. Klavier cannot comprehend what he is hearing. His once beloved beacon of justice, his own brother, has committed murder multiple times, has been abusing his position as a man of law, and has abused him as well to carry out his filthy and egomaniacal plans. Has then been caught and found out, and after all of this, still carries the shamelessness to call his work perfect. Klavier knows how this will end now, and he is relieved. He is relieved to finally close this chapter of his life by disposing of any respect he still had left for Christoph. He finally realizes that he is above his manipulations at last, and so it all boils over. Every emotion stored up inside him culminating and flowing out, and he laughs. And then he smiles. This moment right here is when it all falls into place. This smile is what completes Klavier Gavin. I don't know if you relate, but playing through this game it always felt to me as if something was still amiss about Klavier. There was not any particular line of dialogue or animated sprite to point to, but yet I suspected I had missed something about him. He felt a little dishonest to me, which is objectively absurd after how much he has helped Apollo over the course of this game, but subjectively I felt he was still hiding something. Then one day I sat there and pondered, looking at this very smile. I changed my perspective and reimagined the entire game from Klavier's perspective, and finally it clicked for me. I noticed what he was always hiding, what he was dishonest about, and what was still left to know about him. His pain, his suffering, not in this moment, but over the course of this entire game. It's entirely hidden away. I may have shone a light on how the events of this game's story affect Klavier personally, but really, it is never clearly stated once in-game how he feels at all, only ever hinted at. His doubts about his past judgments, his grief, his broken relationships and feelings of betrayal, and his utter loss of faith and trust in his own big brother. Neither he nor anyone else ever calls out these negative experiences of his, because nobody notices, because he doesn't want them to. If he weren't laughing, he'd be crying. That's the point. He laughs, he smiles, he sings and rocks so that he doesn't cry. Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, a video game visual novel for the Nintendo DS from the year 2007, has accomplished writing a character that genuinely hides their pain perfectly. Not someone who hides it from others before finally breaking down and opening up to their friends and loved ones. Not someone who hides it from all others but is seen by the viewer being vulnerable and insecure. No. Were it not for this one single sprite and line of dialogue, nobody over the course of everything that happened would have ever known how Klavier truly feels. Not even the players. And that's entirely his goal. He is strong so others can be weak. He is perfect so others can make mistakes. He smiles so that others can cry. Klavier Gavin is one of those people that are so altruistic that it's unhealthy for themselves. We all know one of those. Maybe your mom, your grandmother or grandfather, your aunt, your cousin, your best friend, your partner, wife or husband. Those people that rather take the blame for something they didn't do than argue back. but then also go out and fight for others on the street and in the office vehemently and viciously every day, like they have never stood up for themselves once. In the starkest contrast to his brother Christoph, Klavier lives, acts and suffers solely for the sake of other people. He prosecutes for victims to feel safe, he sings on stage for fans to dance and sing along, and he always smiles for others to smile too. Neuroscientists and sociologists nowadays agree that cheerfulness is neither necessary nor sufficient for a person to smile, and that all smiles are tools used in social interactions. I am sure this is what's almost always going on when Klavier smiles. Maybe sometimes he genuinely does, but mostly he doesn't feel particularly happy or joyful when he smiles. How could he even? The first time we meet him is already after his own idolized brother has been put behind iron bars for murder. And I don't care how cold-hearted or stern you read his character. I don't care who you are and what you project onto Klavier, but these events and the journey from this moment to this moment will leave their scars on anyone. It's heart-wrenching once you notice. The tragic sits so deep within our prince that we ourselves, the players, the fans, don't even notice it. It works so well that it becomes incredibly sad. We fawn over him, we thirst after him like his fangirls in-game do. We get caught up in his silly air guitaring and pop rock references that we forget he lost his brother and best friend while we were watching. We brought them down, we exposed them, we shattered this man's life, and all he does is stand back up, follow our logic, cheer us on and smile. But never forget that sometimes it is the one who smiles that suffers the most.